English translation 463rd contact. Thursday, 24th April 2008, 16:48 hours.
There you are already. I thought I would get to the office before you guys. I went out this afternoon and I just got home a few minutes ago. Be greeted together and welcome.
My greetings to you as well, Edouard, my friend. I am glad to see you. I also give you my greetings. Unfortunately, I can only be brief about what we have to discuss, so I will start right away, because I have to go my way again. Thus it is to be said that I have already completed the study group compilation. If I dictate them to you, you can write them down.
Then I will type it right into the computer. Yes, it is already switched on.
Good. It can also be with the computer. Then you can record this. The whole thing is thus scheduled for the next 5 years, after which there will be a new compilation, but you will have to do it yourself every 5 years thereafter. The compilation which I have now given you was made for certain reasons which I had to take into account, and these were based on what you had sent me via Florena. I have also discussed this with Ptah, so I have come to the conclusion that, from various aspects, the new list of study groups should be drawn up in the wise it is now presented. He also informed me that
Facts that unfortunately cannot be undone, and therefore cannot be changed, because the past cannot be changed.
this is of correctness. But before I have to leave again, I have 2 more things to discuss with you, but we should do this in such a wise that it is not transmitted later for the conversation recording.
Of course, go ahead and shoot.
Then I will begin with it. I would like to add the following. Then my second request.
I guess these things can also only take their course. When I think that
Thank you for your remarks, which are very similar to what Ptah and I came up with in equal measure. Then I will leave now. So farewell then, and have a good time. Goodbye.
farewell and also goodbye. And he is gone. Can I ask you a few questions?
Of course.
You once explained to me in a private conversation some time ago that here on the Earth, certain cancers are caused by additives that act as preservatives and make the meat last longer. A few days ago I had a conversation about this, but I could not remember which additive is mainly so severely carcinogenic. I think we talked about it about 3 years ago, if you can remember.
The conversation is still familiar to me and took place privately on the 5th of May 2005 at the end of our official contact conversation. What I explained at that time was something like the fact that processed meat of all kinds is treated with highly carcinogenic sodium nitrite and is very dangerous for human consumption. So meat treated with sodium nitrite should be eaten very little or not at all. Those were roughly my words.
Yes, now that you mention it, the conversation is back in my head. It would be interesting to know which types of meat should be considered most.
It is the processed meats that contain carcinogenic substances, but it is also various other foods of all kinds. With regard to the sodium nitrite in meat and with regard to other foods treated with preservatives, it is to be said that these are mainly industrially produced products, whereas sodium nitrite and preservatives are not used in privately produced homemade products.
Understood, but I have not made myself clear, because my question is about knowing which types of processed meat products contain the carcinogenic substance sodium nitrite, which should be avoided completely or at least enjoyed only very little. And what about organic products in relation to meat, vegetables, fruit, jams, etc.?
Unfortunately, I misunderstood you. In particular, all meat products that require a processing procedure, such as all small and large sausages of all kinds, which also includes salami and other similar products. Also to be mentioned here are packaged or shrink-wrapped hams and other types of meat, as well as all meat in frozen ready meals and all meat packed in cans, etc. Meat is treated with sodium nitrite in particular to preserve the red color of the meat. Any kind of meat that is air-dried is not treated with sodium nitrite and is therefore harmless, as is usually also the case with organic products in relation to meat products, fruit, berries, and vegetables. However, certain organic products are not purely biologically safe because their producers sometimes have fraudulent elements among them who secretly use prohibited substances for good production.
A lot of people have thought that. And what do you think about the fact that more and more natural foods are being processed into motor fuels? Already the Mexicans, etc., are having big problems because the corn they use as food is now being shipped to the USA to be used as fuel. Of course, the people responsible for this are both Mexicans and Americans, who are not concerned about the misery of the Mexican people, but only about the dollars they can rake in. Something similar is also happening with regard to rice.
We have made probability calculations about this. So it is to say that if everything continues within the current framework in this regard, a new crisis is looming on the Earth, a worldwide catastrophe with regard to food, which is becoming increasingly scarce due to the mistreatment you mentioned. If the whole thing continues within this framework, the disaster is only a matter of time and is not going to be stopped. Due to the criminal machinations of fuel production from natural food, the price of unprocessed food is increasing more and more, which takes on worse and worse forms and also has an effect on the final price or consumer price because food is becoming more and more expensive and unaffordable for many people. In addition, the world population continues to grow rapidly and irresponsibly, requiring more and more food and other goods that can no longer be obtained. The biofuel industry is becoming more and more powerful, and the price increase of natural food is already up to 90% and 100% in some cases, as our investigations show. The price of meat is also rising, because the feed prices for animals fattened for slaughter are also rising, of course. Especially in countries with little food of their own. If things continue like this, there will be very serious problems in the foreseeable future because they will no longer be able to import anything. And this is because export bans have already been imposed on food exports. And this is also the case with certain countries that have always tried desperately to sell their overproduction of goods all over the world. On the contrary, other countries have a huge advantage, namely those that have their own large food production. On the other hand, such countries still face the risk of major disadvantages if they continue to maintain or even promote the production of biofuels.
Nice outlook. And what do you think about the fact that about 900 scientists worldwide claim that global warming is just a fairy tale?
This is an irresponsible stupidity of self-important would-be scientists. Because the climate catastrophe is a scientifically proven and undeniable fact, which has also been established by responsible earthly scientists and can be proven by them. Only none of the responsible people want to understand that the real reason for the catastrophe lies in overpopulation. Of scientific and other academic degrees, there are only a few who recognize and understand that overpopulation as the true reason for the uprising of nature and the planet, while all the narrow-minded would-be scientists dismiss the truth as a scientific fairy tale.
These erring and poor numbskulls are also driving the media mad and skeptical with their nonsense. And among the lunatics are even Nobel Prize winners who receive the prize for their nonsense.
That is known to me.
It has been quite a number of years since you told me that in addition to all the evils of overpopulation and the resulting climate change, there is also another reason that has to be calculated at about 25 to 30%, and that is a change that is taking place throughout our solar system.
That is of correctness, because in the whole SOL system, a big physical change is taking place. These are things that are normal in themselves in the change of the sun and all its planets, as well as in the galaxy and in the whole cosmos, but which are not yet understood by Earth humans, and which they therefore probably see as anomalies. The obvious changes in the weather and geophysics on the Earth also play a role in this process to 25 to 30%, while the rest is due to human overpopulation. Thus, since the 1940s, much has changed to the planetary and human disadvantage due to the mass of overpopulation, while physical change has also changed a lot due to the universe's processes. For example, when I travel through the solar system, the sun has become much more active, as is the case with any such structure as it approaches its end. However, with your sun, it will still take about 1.5 billion, 1/500,000 years until it finally comes to its end. Millions of years ago, polar ice formed on Mercury, which is now undergoing a transformation. And further, through natural cosmic change, the strength of the aurora borealis of the planet Venus has also been increased by a very large percentage, while the atmosphere also shows great changes. On Mars, there are more and more violent storms, and the melting of the polar ice caps is also making itself felt. With regard to Jupiter, it is to be said that there is a very strong increase in brightness in the plasma clouds surrounding it, while the velocity decreases in the equatorial jet streams. Further out in the system, Uranus shows very strong changes in brightness and a planet-wide increase in cloud activity. Neptune also has an increase in atmospheric brightness, but not on a large scale. Finally, there is Pluto, which is moving away from the Sun and whose atmospheric pressure is increasing very strongly. These are roughly the present facts of the SOLE system change.
And why is that?
To this I have already said. It is a cosmic change of the Sun with all its planets and their satellites. That is to say, a SOL system change, which is cosmically or universally determined, and in which the galaxy or the Milky Way is also included. The whole comprises the continuous overall universal change, thus universe-wide all galaxies and their solar systems, etc. This natural transformation also means that galaxies collide or merge over millions and billions of years and become larger and larger, just as happened with the Milky Way, which will merge with the galaxy Andromeda to form one big galaxy. The whole process of transformation in the SOL system is therefore completely normal and cosmic or universal, and in no wise leads back to an anomaly.
What our scientists or even the would-be scientists do not understand, they simply call an anomaly.
This is not news to me.
Once again, a question regarding Adolf Hitler. You have clearly explained to me that he committed suicide in Berlin on the 30th of April 1945 and was then burned to death. The Russians then buried his few remains left over from the cremation several times, dug them up again, and finally brought them to Moscow. In recent times, when the bone material was released for analysis, it was also possible to prove that these were really the remains of Hitler. Now, however, recently various people, such as a certain Jordan Smith, perhaps an invented name, have been claiming that Dolphy's death was only invented by the British, who only invented the story of the suicide to damage the reputation of National Socialism. This damage to the reputation, a psychological warfare, so to speak, was intended to break the will of the German people to resist the foreign occupiers.
This assertion is pure nonsense. Because Adolf Hitler actually committed suicide, as my father Svath has told you at the time when the event took place, which he also observed himself, as I know from his notes.
My memory of it is gone, probably when I had my health breakdown in 1982. But many other things have slipped my mind as a result of the breakdown, especially from my childhood, puberty, teenage years, and also afterwards. The more happy I am that with Simya Sei's, Quetzal's, your help and my own efforts, I could at least remember all that is important for the mission and for me. Fortunately, I was also able to recover everything concerning the handling of the memory banks. Other things I could not manage anymore, like hypnosis, telekinesis, and teleportation. If I would try to do it again, I might be able to do it again, but I do not know why I would do it. Basically, I am satisfied with all the things I still can and know how to use.
You are just amazing.
Why do you think?
Other humans would grieve, and besides that, what you did after your collapse is an enormous achievement, which has remained a mystery to me until today.
It is simply that whatever happens or whatever one starts, one must never give up, but rather it must always be seen through to the end or got through and finished. I learned that from childhood on. So it is not something special to puzzle about and, Quetzal, there you are again. Did you forget your head? Be welcome again and greeted.
Typical, but also my greetings anew. I still carry the head on my shoulders, but I neglected to ask what will be the cost of translating the Goblet of the Truth. Ta and I have been talking about it, because he has been trying to find out about the cost, so I am interested in what has come up.
Failure is good, because I guess you forgot to ask.
That is probably the right word, yes.
So then here, this is the quote for the fee. The translation costs CHF 91,41.20. The duration of the translation is estimated at 1 year.
That is a fair price if it stays the same.
That is also my opinion. That is assuming there are no additional costs.
We also feel that this fee is fair. There should not be any further costs.
Then I think you should consider this offer from this CLS communication for the translation, although you should first obtain a test translation and check it.
This has already been arranged by Bernadette. She has also requested a test translation from Rebecca so that we can then compare the two translations. Elsewhere, Rebecca says that she will need 2 years for the translation. Although according to her offer, the fee is also much higher, namely around CHF 30,000 more at the current exchange rate of the euro, which may increase depending on the exchange rate.
This is probably not acceptable, both in terms of the cost and the time required for the translation.
I agree with you also. Besides, it is questionable whether Rebecca could translate the work into correct British language.
We will have to see about the sample translation. In any case, we have planned that Rebecca should at least translate the introduction, the preface, and the epilogue, although it is probably not important whether this is translated into British or American English. Of course, the fee also plays a role because according to the present one, it should be finished less expensively and in a reasonable time.
That is probably a matter of course. Whether British or American English is used for this work is certainly not important.
That is also my opinion.
Then it is settled. Goodbye, my friend. Farewell.
And he is gone, and there is nothing I can say back. He is in a real hurry. What I would like to say is that last weekend the whole group decided that after the translation was completed, we would have the Goblet of the Truth, printed in English-German, in the same format and with the same layout as the German edition.
We have already talked about this briefly, and it is reasonable to have the English-German edition printed by Fee Gu.
This is something we all need and should also be able to do. If the appeal for donations for the translation results in sufficient financial means, then there will also be enough for the printing, which should also be the same as the OM, with linen binding and gold embossing, which is not exactly cheap.
But for this most valuable book ever written for Earth humans, all effort of value and responsibility is justified.
All core group members think so too, and also all the humans who donate to it. However, we do not yet know what the book will cost, because Bernadette must first process and format the whole work, etc., after which we can obtain a quotation from our printer, Mr. Poland. But we think that the Goblet of the Truth will cost less than the OM. Yes, we had to pay so much for this one because we had it printed in Switzerland. Yes, it was bound by Hans Georg, because he is a trained bookbinder. Nevertheless, the price was very expensive at CHF 120. But since we are now having the work printed in Germany in A4 format, like all of our books, we can get away with it much less expensively, so we expect the final price to be around CHF 60 to CHF 70. But we will only know the exact price when we can get a quote.
It is important that the book is distributed quickly.
That is what we will try to do with our limited resources. The internet and our website will certainly help us a lot. But now something else. Look here. I received this fax from Andrew Cassette on the 22nd, after which I immediately translated it and integrated it into Special Bulletin number 46 of next September. Of course, I had to translate it first, so that the whole thing can now be read like this.
UFO observation as reported in News 5, Phoenix, Arizona, the 22nd of April, 2008, sent by Andrew Cassette, Arizona, USA. Mysterious lights observed over northern Phoenix.
The police and media of Phoenix, USA, were flooded with calls Monday night, the 21st of April 2008, after people observed 4 or 5 red lights hovering in the sky over northern Phoenix. Callers said the lights appeared as a straight line at one point, but also formed a square and then a triangle. They were visible for about 15 minutes at 20 miles/hour before heading east and disappearing. Duty officers at Deer Valley Airport in northern Phoenix and air traffic controllers at Sky Harbor International in the Eastern District of Phoenix were also among those who saw the lights. They could not explain them, and the Air Force said the lights were not part of any Air Force activity. Translation Billy.
Now the question, whether you have any knowledge about this matter. Were these lights ships from your Federation, or from the 3 different foreign groups?
Since we only sporadically include the 3 different foreign groups in our observations, I cannot say anything about it, because at that time, the area mentioned in the report did not fall within our closer observation range. As I judge the whole thing according to this report, it must have been the flying ships of the 3 foreign groups. The whole thing with the formations and the flight movements and the disappearance of the flying ships clearly indicates that. In any case, we have not registered any flying ships other than those of the 3 alien groups for a long time, not even with regard to flights into terrestrial airspace. We would certainly have registered new alien visitors, and moreover, such entries are very rare, because many alien life forms of foreign and distant worlds do not have space travel at their disposal, while others are not yet able to cover the universal distances. For this reason alone, it is an absolute rarity that strangers from other worlds of the Milky Way or even from other galaxies come to the Earth. Very big exceptions are the 3 alien groups and those few you know of who have joined our Federation, which is why we naturally no longer consider them strangers. Those also belong to our Federation today, whose expedition ship was destroyed over the Tunguska Plain about 100 years ago.
There are programs on television which explain that many private people, Also well-known scientists are sending messages with big antennas purposefully out into space in order to make extraterrestrials aware of the Earth and the Earthlings. What do you think about this?
This nonsense is as familiar to me as the enterprise that was started decades ago from the U.S. American side with the golden, round plate that contains a lot of information about the Earth and the earthly humanity, for the purpose that human exo-life forms should become aware of the Earth and Earth humans if they can get hold of the information. The whole thing is not only nonsensical, but also dangerous, for all sorts of unpleasant things can happen both through the information plate and through the messages that are sent wildly out into the world space. It is a fact that not only an unpeaceful and warlike humanity exists on the Earth, but also on foreign worlds. And if such evil-minded life forms catch the earthly messages and are powerful in space travel, then this can have very bad consequences for the Earth and Earth's humanity. And that also when several or many decades or even a century or more pass until such nonsensical messages are caught, and then spaceships are sent to the Earth to wreak havoc here, whereby even humankind could be exterminated. There are life forms powerful enough for space travel in all galaxies suitable for it, whereby these are very far scattered, but have created space possibilities as diverse as they also have the necessary technology to get to the Earth. Time is not an issue for certain human space-capable life forms, because they reach a high old age, so they can easily travel to Earth for 40, 60, 100 or more years, if their technology also allows them to do so. And indeed, there are dangerous contemporaries among them, as you say in each case, who can bring destruction and ruin, which they also do in their home systems.
Not pleasing, but the firecrackers who send messages out into space cannot be proven wrong, because they claim that the radio and TV shows that are broadcast constantly reach aliens and draw their attention to the Earth. Consequently, the messages they send out are no more and no less in the same frame.
This is of correctness to a certain extent, but to send out targeted messages with exact information into space is more dangerous.
I am aware of that. Then to something else. Yes, you're also following the Olympic torch relay. The Olympic torch relay is very much disturbed in practically all countries by demonstrations and gay revolt to use power, with all the coercive means that are at one's disposal, physical, psychical, mental, and consciousness-based powers, abilities and skills, in order to carry out and carry through tremendous actions and deeds and injustices, attacks by Tibetans and Tibetans living in the countries where the torch relay takes place. There is howling and raving against China and demands for free Tibet. Of course, the Dalai Lama is behind all this with his anti-China propaganda. He knows how to get his followers in a rage just by threatening to resign as the big boss of the exiled government, because they see in him the real savior.
This is what is real. The Dalai Lama uses his believers and other followers to turn the Olympics into an act of political terror and to insult and denigrate China in every possible kind and wise. Of course, China has been a state of gay revolt and injustice since ancient times, but what is done by the Dalai Lama and his followers and believers is not right. On the other hand, the Lamist monks and believers also take up arms and take action against the Chinese people, which shows what is really behind Lamaist monasticism and faith. Namely, nothing better than is the case with all other religions that consecrate their weapons and kill humans with them. And that here now the peaceful competitive spirit of the Olympics is turned into a political power struggle by the machinations of the Dalai Lama and his believers and followers. This is not only wrong and very regrettable, but criminal, inhumane, felonious, and an unparalleled farce. Peaceful Olympics must remain peaceful Olympics, and what is politics must remain politics, and this has nothing to do with the Olympics, and must therefore not be mixed up with political acts of might. And what is being done with the acts of gay vault and demonstrations against China is an injustice to the whole of the Chinese people. Because these humans are the victims of all the malicious and dishonest behavior of the enemies of China, demonstrators and perpetrators of Gewalt. The Chinese humans love their country, so it hits them all the harder, as demonstrated by the criminal, felonious, and inhumane acts of gay vault and demonstrations against China. Consequently, every human being who joins in the Dalai Lama's power-hungry machinations, disrupts the Olympic torch relay, cries out obscene words against China, and demands a free Tibet is in the wrong. This is not the way and not an act of peace, but an evil act of open terror, of which every human being is guilty, who participates in such actions or also cultivates thoughts in this wise. For Tibet cannot be freed by the Dalai Lama's conjured-up worldwide terror against China, for China is rightly not getting involved in this. All the demonstrations and acts of gay vault against the torchbearers and the evil words against China force the country's rulers all the more to be stubborn and relentless. But the sheer low intelligentum, unintellect, and irrationality as well as illogic of the perpetrators of gay vault and demonstrators is so great that they are not able to recognize this truth. Should it be that Tibet will one day become independent, then this will require lengthy negotiations as well as intellect, rationality, and logic, which, however, cannot be conducted by the power-hungry Dalai Lama and his envoys, but only by neutral negotiating partners who themselves do not seek religious and political power, as is the case with the Dalai Lama and his envoys. And in such negotiations no gay vault and no demonstrations must be in the foreground, but only intellect, rationality, and logic. As far as China's Gewalt-based history is concerned, that is a different matter and was and is not controlled by the Chinese people, but by the rulers, and the people cannot be held responsible for that, because they have practically nothing to say in China but only to obey. China's rulers are too powerful with their overflowing military, police, and security forces, etc., so that the people could defend themselves. If a change for the better is to take place, it can only happen gradually, and indeed such that the people slowly come together and through negotiations demand and take ever better paths. So that those in power are influenced, they change their attitudes and their views and opinions and slowly become more humane. The Goblet of the Truth is the book that the Chinese need just as much as all other Earth humans of all countries and all religions, sects, philosophies, and ideologies.
May your words reach the ears of the humans, but unfortunately, the low intelligentum of certain humans knows no bounds. Those addicted to low intelligentum see, and also do not know that since the times of Mao Zedong and Mao Zedong, certain things in China have changed for the better. And they also do not see or know what China has done with regard to Tibet, or for the Tibetan people, namely that China freed them from debt subjugation, serfdom, and slavery. And even if the good and progressive things that China has done for the people in the country in its own country are not very much by our European standards, they are still a lot for China. But of course the regime's violence must not be overlooked, through which many injustices are perpetrated on humans, the many thousands of executions being the greatest Ausartung, to get very badly out of control of the good human nature. But that is not the Chinese people, but the regime that is guilty for the Gewalt. The people of China are neither better nor worse than other people in all other countries of the world. And just as the Swiss and all the other humans of all the states of our world are proud of their homeland and appreciate and love it, so are the Chinese people. For this reason alone, It is a boundless disgrace for all those who harass China with regard to the Olympics and the Olympic torch relay, because it is not the Chinese regime that is fundamentally affected by the demonstrations and Gestalt-based machinations of the fools who are believers and followers of the Dalai Lama, but the entire Chinese population. The latter, however, is innocent of the actions of the regime, against which it cannot defend itself, at least not yet, because the time and the necessary popular movement for freedom are not yet ripe. So it is a wickedness unparalleled by all the violent and demonstrating people who rant against China and who, in their primitive low intelligentum, do not know what they are doing, namely that they are attacking the entire population of China and its joy in relation to the Olympics, and that they are insulting the entire people without limit. It is already no longer just of low intelligentum. It is even primitive and indeed, as you say, criminal and felonious to call what the demonstrators and perpetrators of Gestalt against the Olympic torch relay and against the Chinese people, under the insidious leadership and wicked machinations of the Dalai Lama and his vicious underground army, are doing and are jeopardizing the Chinese people's right to hold and experience an Olympic Games in their country at long last. The whole thing, which is directed against the Chinese people in this respect, is sheer racism and of the most primitive low intelligentum, with the people of China being idiotically and completely hypocritically held responsible for what is solely the responsibility of the regime. But certain humans are really of low intelligentum and primitive, as it also applies to those who, for example, by so-called commemoration ceremonies, cheer on the terrible Nazi machinations and thereby promote neo-Nazism. But equally of low intelligentum and primitive are also those who, for example, hold the people of Germany today responsible for the crimes committed by their ancestors in the First and Second World Wars, even though the Germans of today are completely innocent of everything, because their generations did not take part in either of the two wars. Nevertheless, there are many haters of German in all countries of the world, because they keep warming up the events of the war crimes of that time through tradition, explode through tirades of hatred, incite bystanders and denigrate the Germans. But nobody wants to know anything about the equally great war crimes committed, and still being committed by the US America worldwide, let alone that the USA or those responsible for them, such as Bush and his ilk, are being called to account by the UNO and the War Crimes Tribunal in The Hague. What Israel is doing in relation to Palestine is also part of this, but all crimes are tolerated worldwide, while Palestine and its people are condemned all round. Of course, this does not mean that Palestine's terrorist activities can be tolerated, because they are not better than the terrorist acts of Israel, the USA and all other states, which, through their military and police organizations as well as through secret services and so-called security services, carry out terror, rape, destruction and annihilation and spread murder, manslaughter as well as affliction, misery and grief. And when I say this so clearly and unambiguously, then again the uninformed, those of low intelligentum, the insane, the naive and the know-it-alls, etc. come along again and claim that I am politicizing, although this is in no wise the case, because I am in fact doing nothing other than clearly and unambiguously pointing out what is the reality and truth. And as a responsible human being, it is my duty and obligation to show truth and reality as it effectively is, and to do so without mincing my words, because it is not allowed to beat about the bush, as is done cowardly by the media and by all those low intelligentum and primitive people who only have a big mouth, who speak empty hollow words, and who cowardly and fearfully hide from the truth and reality. And I think that I will also put what we have now discussed together on the internet with a new special bulletin.
You also do not hold back in relation going public with your words, which are true in all points, I know that. But I can only agree with you to do what you said, because it is extremely rare on the earth that someone dares to tell the truth in such truthful words as you have always done. But that you will be attacked by the really ignorant and lowly intelligentum, as it also happened again and again since the beginning of your mission, and that you even endangered your life, That should be without question.
I know, my friend, but that does not prevent me from fulfilling my duty. But if I may ask you one more question, if you still have time for it.
I still have time for one question, but then I really must go. I have no predictions to make today, but perhaps extraordinary things will be produced at my next visit, which will already be in a few days, because I will then be busy with a certain job in the Soil system.
That is all right, too. Well, then I would like to ask about what your daughter Sim Ya-se said to me once, and indeed, that somewhere in your space-time configuration, a planet exists where women live exclusively. Unfortunately, Sim Ya-se gave me no further explanations about that. I still know that in those days we spoke about the Amazons, for which reason she spoke about this planet of women. Now I would like to ask you why only women live on that planet and how it is possible, in spite of that they have descendants, as Sim Ya-se said.
That which my daughter said to you is right. All over that planet, which is named Saratan, there are no male human beings, rather actually only female. And that they bear descendants in spite of that is because already, for more than 1,600 years, they have developed spermatozoa from stem cells, with which they fertilize themselves and thereby bring about descendants. With the successful development of the spermatozoa, only spermatozoa which guarantee female offspring are selected to use for procreation.
And can the gender of the offspring actually already be thereby determined?
That is right.
Then are you saying that in fact only females are therefore born on the planet Saratan?
Yes.
And how did it come to be that the women there arrived at this practice?
The world of men was very geared towards acts of gavolt against the world of women, and also constantly led bloody wars and stirred up strife with all possible means. When finally that was too much for the women, consequently they found means and ways in the manner I have mentioned, whereby they gave birth only to female offspring. So it came to be that there were fewer and fewer men, and they finally died out.
And I assume that the women there certainly live a good and peaceful life.
That is also right, which can be attributed, not in the least, to the fact that the entire world of women lives by the creational laws and recommendation as they have been passed down from Nocodemion. Then I would now like to go into your question which you put to me concerning Jacobus about Florence and what I was trying to do. The following is to be said, which you must also urgently explain to Jacobus, because it is of great importance to him. But now, my friend Edouard, the time has come. In a few days' time, I will come to see you again. Go safely and take good care of yourself. Farewell.
See you soon. Take care, dear friend.